Birshuta Rabbanim, with the permission of the rabbis, I would like to excuse me, teach something about the Talmud, because one of the biggest questions that the Talmud has is that, especially the Talmud from Babylon, has a tractate for all the holidays but one, and that holiday is Shavuot. We don't have a tractate of Shavuot. We have Yom Rosh Hashanah, Pesachim, Sukkah, all the holidays, or at least the biblical holidays, and Shavuot there's nothing. But in the Talmud from Jerusalem, the Talmud Yerushalmi, there's a tractate, small one. It's called Masechet Bikurim, that deals with some of the stories of Shavuot. So I'm going to share with you some passages of Masechet Bikurim. Please try not to fall asleep. So it's in the Talmud Yerushalmi. It says, how do they bring the Bikurim up to Jerusalem? How do they bring the first fruits? All the people from different cities came. They could sleep in the streets of a closer city to Jerusalem without going into the houses. When they aroused, the supervisor would say, "Arise, let us go up to Zion, to the house of the Lord our God." Those who were close would bring dates and grapes, and the far ones would bring dried figs and raisins. A bull would go before them, and its horns would be plated with gold, and it would have an olive wreath around its head. The flute would play before them until they got close to Jerusalem. Wow. Once they got close to Jerusalem, they would send ahead of them a messenger and adorned their bikurim, their first fruits, their baskets. The overseers and officers and the treasurers would go out to greet them in accordance with the statute of those coming in. Would they go out? All the artisans of Jerusalem would stand before them and greet them. "Oh, brothers from so-and-so city, come in peace." Nice image. The flute would continue playing before them until they arrived at the Temple Mount. Once they arrived at the Temple Mount, even Agrippa the king would carry his basket on his shoulder and enter until he reached the courtyard. Once they got into the courtyard, the Levites would speak in song, "I will extol you, O Lord, because you have raised me and not allowed my enemies to rejoice over me." 5-10 more minutes of readings, no worries. And what was in their hands, they gave it to the Kohanim. With the basket still on one's shoulder, one should recite from, "I declare today to the Lord my God." That is the part of the portion that we read today, until finishing the entire passage. Rabbi Yehuda says, until Arami Obed Abi, my father was a wandering Aramean. Once one gets to my father was a wandering Aramean, one takes the basket off one's shoulder and holds it by one's lips. The priest places his hand under it and waves it. He then recites, "Arami Obed Abi, my father was a wandering Aramean," until finishing the entire passage, and rests the baskets beside the altar and prostrates and leaves. That's a description of the ceremony that took place in the temple in Jerusalem, and the passage that people would say is part of the portion that we read today. I think this ceremony deserves at least a wow. What a great ceremony. Can you imagine that multiplied by thousands of people? Can you for an instant think of Jerusalem filled with joy and happiness? I hope you were able to grasp some of the beauty of this ceremony. I strongly believe that if we look at the text in the Torah, there is almost an internal dialogue, an ongoing dialogue. Some parts of the Torah are responding to previous or future parts of the text. I do not have a lot of time to expand. I already spent like half an hour telling you about this ceremony. But, for example, when we read about Abraham and Sarah, and God telling Abraham, "Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah shma vekola," all that Sarah tells you, you should listen. That's in a strong dialogue with what part of the Torah? Bereshit, exactly the story when Adam listened to Eve and he ate from the forbidden fruit. And God says, because you heard your wife's voice, you are condemned now, okay? And later, you should hear your wife's voice. Okay? Nothing to do with today's, okay? I'm not talking about it. I'm just talking the internal dialogue in the Torah, okay? For example, the story of Jacob's ladder, that is the story of Bethel, that gives the name of Bethel, and that's Bezeh Shar Hashamayim. This is the gate to heaven. Talks directly with what story in the Torah? Internal story? Tower of Babel, okay? They were building a tower to get to the door of Shamayim. And in Aramaic, Bab is gate. Baba Batra, Baba Metzia is the middle gate, the first gate. Bab El or Bab Ilu is the door to God. Okay, so there's always internal stories in the Torah. So if we follow the idea that there's an internal dialogue in the Torah, and this action of bringing the first fruits, when you are in the land of Israel, has another part in the Torah that speaks with what that part would be. I know that's kind of difficult. In other words, first fruits, the Bikurim that we read today, is in dialogue with what other part of the Torah? Anybody would like to guess? The price is a box of matzah for Pesach? Nobody? Okay. So I invite you to open your Humashim, your big red books, on page 24. I'm going to do the same. Page 24. Now, Adam knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gained a male child with the help of the Lord. Well, kaniti, it's a word that it's not very well translated. I made together. She then bore his brother Abel. Abel became keeper of sheep, and Cain became a tiller of the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought an offering to the Lord from the fruit of the soil. And Abel, for his part, brought the choices of the firstlings of his flock. Behebel ebi gam u mi bechorot tzono, the first fruits of his produce. There is a clear dialogue between the beginning of the Torah and the end of the Torah. The universal tale of humanity and the particular tale of the Jewish people. Hashem is telling us, I know you read and studied Torah. I know you've been a Talmid Chacham and went to yeshiva, and you know the story of Cain and Abel very well. Do not be afraid. They were the first inhabitants of the land. You're entering the land of Israel for the first time. Do not be scared. You can still be thankful. Do not worry. You can bring offerings, the best produce of your field, and you will survive. God says, I will not let this happen again. Bring your first fruit, the best of your fruits. I will take care of you. You're safe. Dear friends, I think there's even a deeper message that I want to study with you together. If you look close on the text, on page 24, verse 2. ותוסף ללדת את אחיו, את הבל. ויהיה הבל רועה צאן, וקין היה עובד אדמה. Abel became a keeper of sheep, and Cain became a tiller of the soil. The word Oved, a worker, a tiller of the soil, can be read also as Eved, a slave of the soil. You can read that Cain, who failed bringing his offering to God, was a slave of the land. The portion that we read today tells us you are not a slave, you're a partner. You have a partnership with God. You've worked hard taking care of your trees and your land. You get the first fruit, and you understand that it does not belong to you. And you are grateful. Hashem is your partner. Hashem is expecting you to share because it does not belong to you. So now I'm going to talk to you about Bethesda 2016. I bet many of you, or most of you, are not farmers. Yes, am I right? I bet many of you never even thought about becoming farmers. Agriculture is not the main source of making a living amongst us. Most of us work in offices and many of us close to computers, and yet we can still be partners with God. And yet we can still bring our first fruits, our precious children and grandchildren, to be educated and study Torah and learn about our tradition. And yet we can still find the spark of holiness every day in our routines. And yet we can still give our share to create a better world. And yet we can still discover ongoing dialogues between the Torah and us. It is okay. We already learned that it's safe to bring first fruits. We are not like Cain and we are not like Abel. The flute would continue playing before them until they arrived at the Temple Mount. Once they arrived at the Temple Mount, even the king would carry his basket on his shoulder and enter. Think for a moment all the good things you can contribute, all the many baskets you can fill and bring to this world. Today is the day. Do not wait until tomorrow, because it is time to bring your own bikurim, your own first fruits. Shabbat Shalom.